Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of the Real Estate Investors Club podcast. So, I have the honor today not only of having our guest, Nick Slobodniak, on with us, but I also have a new co host, Axel Monseignon. And Axel is a real estate investor who actually graduated from the club, I guess maybe in the past a year and a half. And he's also the co-host of the show, The Very Real Estate Effect. And so we're lucky to have him on board at least for the next little while to help us continue the show. So, Axel.
Hey, well, thank you very much, Terry. It's an honor to be here. The club has given me a lot, and it's a great way to give back. So thank you for the participation. So today we have Nick Slobodniak from PMML. Nick, you're a senior broker. You've been with the firm now for 4 years. You've closed tens of millions of dollars of transactions. And parts of the reason for today is because you've been known for your negotiation skills. So we were hoping to hear a little bit more about it, and maybe you could share some tricks and tips on how to connect with people to really create win-win situations.
Beautiful. Thank you guys for having me here. Axel, Terry, thanks a lot. It's a great opportunity to express the passion of my profession. And certain people call this negotiation, but honestly, what I do is just communicating better than most of the people for a single purpose. It's to get along. It's to listen, to be understood, and to get things flowing. So negotiation have this kind of connotation to be aggressive, trying to take something out of someone's hands. We don't do that here. We're trying to be diplomatic and polite. And so having done millions in transactions, we develop a good approach with different kind of people. There's old guys that want to sell the place. There's young people, they want to sell. They have different kind of people. So you kind of have to be able to communicate clearly with them. So here I am for you.
And as you said, like there's so many different personalities that come with backgrounds and experiences, and selling a piece of real estate can be very intimidating. And depending on the experience of the buyer and the seller, you said the communication is absolutely key. So maybe to start with, is there some way that you've kind of developed where you can kind of like frame the person that you're negotiating with?
There's always the other person perspective. When you find a person that you want to get into transaction with, you have to understand their perspective. And we're talking a lot about motivation, what drive the other person to sell. But you have to remember one thing: it's not logic that gets you the deal. It's the emotions that you try to avoid or fulfill to the other person that gets you to the deal. And logic will justify them making a good decision. So just for an example, you get into communication with a vendor who is tired of deserving tenants. Well, his emotion, and Terry knows it well. She wrote a wonderful book on management. It takes a lot of patience. So some people don't have that patience. Some people have bad relationship with their tenants. So you have to find out why, with whom, and if he sells to you, is he going to be liberated? The other thing I'd like to share is I'm always trying to be perceived as a fair businessman. So fairness is very important. If you're not fair, it's not going to get too far.
Mm-hmm. And just to follow up on this, it's an excellent point about the fairness. How would you suggest people can establish that fairness? Is it something that's stated at the beginning, or is it like a give and take? Like you give me something, I'll give you something back. Like how does that work?
Yeah, it could be negotiation by giving and taking. But the first thing, when you're just getting into the table to sit to negotiate or to communicate, you have to ask, let's be fair to each other, okay? I want you to be fair. I want you to be fair to me, okay? If ever somebody is not respecting this proposition, let's us speak, So that's how you get into the mind of the person that you want a win-win. And this is where they respect you more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you have another point on that subject? Because I have a question that I'm dying to ask you.
Okay, go.
So, I mean, look, I guess that both Axel and I have been throwing our hats in the ring in the recent market. And for buyers, it's very difficult and very competitive. And I guess, my tendency to think is that there's a kind of a pattern of how transactions go now, which is that basically, you try to overbid as much as you can to get the seller to talk to you. And then afterwards, you try to negotiate what you can through inspections and through, whatever other means you have to bring the price down to something that you're comfortable with. And I have to say, and maybe this is also just, my character and my perspective, like I feel like when you're 20 people in line, really, it seems to me that it's only, the money that talks or the numbers that talk. So maybe from your experience, you could tell us, how do you think in that multiple offer situation, how is there some sort of a negotiating tactic you can use? Whereas I've always assumed it's just, well, if I put an extra, 100K on the table, even if I end up clawing it back with negotiating after the fact. I don't know. Maybe you could sort of speak to that a little bit.
Yes, very good question, Terry. I do get that along, since I'm fighting for my buyers too. And we just closed a $12 million transaction. There were 16 offers on the table, and we're the one who got in. And I can, from my perspective, from my experience, the way to get in is to be nice to people, just to communicate better, try to understand, and by being nice, having a little laugh before you call, or at the first when you call, and then you discuss business. Sometimes it's a broker that you can give him good tap on the shoulder. Listen, oh wow, you're so good. How do I get in? What do I have to do? I'll do anything you want. I just want to get in, please. And he's gonna talk. People talk. And when people talk, they give you valuable information.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's so much my experience. I have more experience with the tenants on that. And I'm always saying, when you're screening tenants, just press on the play button, because you would not believe the stuff that people tell you.
Exactly. So true.
Yeah.
So people talk.
And building on that, for the example that you just give, Nick, would it be reasonable for someone who's interested in submitting an offer, even to invite you out for lunch and just kind of chat? And obviously, most of the conversation isn't necessarily going to be about the deal, but it just helps to build a human rapport.
You could, yes, if you have that chance, go for it. Some brokers wouldn't agree because they're too busy, but over the phone, it suffices. Even sometimes for a triplex, you go for a visit first, right? So then you have your chance to talk to the broker, or maybe call a broker that is good, that is know what it does. Let him handle the communication with the other party.
Is there anything we didn't have a chance to get to? I know I kind of cut you off with my question. Did you have some other sort of communication or soft tips for people?
I have a few, yeah. So one of the most important thing, and you touched it a little bit, how do I structure my offer? How do I negotiate after the inspection? Because you want to get your foot into the door. And I'm the first one who believes that you need to put the foot into the door in order to have that opportunity to connect, because you're not considerate if your offer is not chosen, right? So you want to have a foot into the door, but at what price? Because this might just blow up in your face later on when you come up with a negotiation of $100,000 on $1 million deal, unless it's justified, but just to get, let's say you wanted to put 900,000 for the property, but you're going $1 million just because you're going to cut it 100,000. Most people will be offended by that, So what I say is that the market is hot. You have to overpay a bit, right? So you have to work on yourself first. What is my maximum that I'm willing to pay? So yeah, breaking even point for yourself, plus an extra cushion for negotiation for later on, because there's always something in the building.
You bring up an interesting point. The first part of the negotiation is obviously pretty much just on price. And so the increment sometimes is we go up or down 50,000, 100,000, and so on and so forth. And then both parties agree on a price, and then we start the due diligence. And then sometimes in the due diligence, and I'm sure you've experienced this dozens of times, where you feel like the transaction is almost about to fall because in the due diligence, buyer and seller have a disagreement for a $1,500 amount, and then they think they're going to drop the deal, whereas you used to drop 25,000 at a time. And so it's just the ego that comes in of no, I want to win the negotiation. And so in situations like this, what's your way of cooling people down? Because you're not about to lose $1 million deal because of $1,500.
Exactly. Very good question. It happened to me, to a close friend of mine who wanted to not go ahead for $5,000. He goes I'm going to stick to my price. Go listen, cool down a bit, think it through. Look how like where we started and where we are right now, how much profit are you looking to make in this transaction anyways? You said 300,000. So 300,000, you got to trade this in for $5,000? Are you crazy? He goes like, you're right. And since now, he still thanks me for allowing, that transaction to happen. So
yeah. No, and I think, Nick, that's like really something that you've touched on there that's like super interesting, because like we think of negotiation as really this external thing where it's all about, dealing with the other party as if it's like a wall onto which you throw things.
Yeah.
But like ultimately, part of it has to do with your own approach to things and working on yourself. So, I know you already mentioned, maybe having more of the macro perspective and also coming up with what your ceiling price is. Is there something else that buyers can do to work on themselves to like streamline the process a little bit more?
On themselves, yes, they have to be transparent with the vendor and to themselves. They have to have a strategy for this transaction. It's like a game of chess. You have to set the board. So your offer is setting the board. If you're deviating from the board, from the strategy that you share with the seller, he's not going to be into that game anymore, because there is too much unpredictability, too much time extension. If you're planning to resell the offer and you didn't tell the seller before, well, you might end up facing a wall when you find that guy who wants to buy that offer. So you have to find a way to communicate clearly, transparently, and no lies. That's very important. People, like a small lie would just crash like a multi-million-dollar transaction. I'm telling you, like it's just small lies. They're like the worst. So
I feel like we could like take that advice into like every other aspect of your life. Like, how good is a small lie in a marriage? Not very good.
Oh my God. It's a small lie that crushes the big thing, because why lying about small things? You're definitely hiding something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So any other tips that you would have, negotiating tips?
I like the one that I use a lot is actually two. It's framing your demand. When you want to ask something, if you come, let's say, Terry, you're selling a house, and I want to ask for $15,000 reduction after inspection, then there's two ways to do it. Either I call you, or I tell you, listen, I'm not buying this unless you give me 15,000. How are you going to react? You're probably going to say, well, listen, don't buy it. Ciao.
Take a hike.
Yeah, take a hike. Like, you're not justifying anything, you're just asking. So framing the demand is that you have to show up with coffee to his place and tell him, listen, let me show you a few things that I have discovered. By the way, very nice building. I love it. I'm buying it. I have my financing in place. I have the banker coming in 2 days. We're going to go to the notary in 1 month. Are you happy with that? Yes. Okay. So let me show you what I have discovered about the property. The brick here, this, that, it's an older place. Like, you would understand that I need to put more money into this place than I have initially thought. So good news first, and then bad news. Another one is smile. All right. This, like, if you're only taking one thing away, just smile. Okay. So if you're approaching a girl on the street and and you're not smiling, good luck. If you're negotiating, Axel, if you come to me, with bad news, the first reaction I'm going to have is to smile and say, how do we fix it? Right? Don't assume the deal is over. Don't assume you're just being shot. You're not shot. It's emotions. Just cool down. There's always a way when there's a will. So just smile. We had a few $1 million building for sale, and the buyer, when they did an inspection, they wanted to have $200,000 less in the asking price. So I had to call my seller. I was representing both parties. I had to call my seller and tell him, listen, they want $200,000 on a recent construction. So you know what he told me? I'm not buying, Nick. Cancel my mandate. I don't want to hear anything about them. So I said, listen, come on. Like, we're here. It's not about them. It's about you. What do you want? He said, I want $50,000 more on the price. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, but at least I didn't lose the mandate. The buyer tried to get the price, but at the end, we kind of went back and we had a deal. But just because I didn't react like I was shot in this, like, oh, go away, I don't want to hear anything with you. I've been so long in communications. You cannot act like this. You're not allowed to act like this. You could have been acted like a million ways, but just smiling, asking, okay, what makes you happy? Maybe there's still a solution that we can find together before we close the door. So important.
So, and I'm just curious also, Nick, like you cited that you have a lot of experience, I guess, in dealing with people through your activities as a broker, but did you come by this knowledge in some other way? Like, were there any courses that you take, or is there any kind of like, I don't know, like where did you get this approach? Because I feel like I, for one, might I could take a feather from your hat, you know?
Well, I like to share. So if you wanna grab a lunch, we could do that. I've read a lot of books. Like honestly, a lot of Grant Cardone stuff. I love Grant Cardone. I love different books about negotiation, communication, PNL. Like anything that gets you to communicate better and to understand the other person's how should I say perspective, and a lot of patience, and always like more into like a listener guy than a talker. So I always like to listen to people first and then find solutions, find the emotions, the point that you can deal with to help them better understand you and understand themselves. Because let's admit it, it's a lot of the challenge comes from the other person not being able to process thoughts. So as a communicator, you have to be helping them process thoughts better in a way that makes it more productive.
Great. So I don't know, Nick, was there something else you wanted to share on the topic of negotiation? Because I think we had a couple other questions that sort of move out of that sphere.
Let's go with the questions if you have.
So yeah, I guess like from your vantage point at PMML, we're always curious as investors to hear what's your assessment of what's going on in the market now. Like I think we had obviously like a very hot spell during the last year of COVID, but do you, in what you see every day, do you see that continuing? Do you see things like calming down a little bit? What's your ear to the ground opinion?
Good question. Excellent question, Terry. Because what's going on? We see a lot of things going on right now. A new construction, we have used inventory. What I see a lot is that a lot of sellers they are trying to put crazy prices on their properties, but it pushes the market up, So somebody who used to put a property at $200,000 per door 6 months ago, and I'm talking per door because it's mostly fast to see how price and real estate are growing. I don't expect the market crashing in the near future. I don't think it's going to happen in Canada. I just think we might reach a point where some real estate is going to stagnate because the prices are not increasing so fast. But at the same time, yeah, that's my perspective on it.
I wonder, so I guess what I'm seeing sort of from the ground up is the rental market is very difficult right now. I feel like now that things have kind of begun to relax a little bit in terms of restrictions and in terms of migration, things are warming up a tiny bit. But I know that I have, in my buildings and in the buildings I manage, higher vacancy rates than I think I've had in the last 10 years. And I guess one of the things that I wonder about is when I look at 6 months, 1 year in the future, what kind of pressure is that going to exert on the market, like on the price people are willing to pay for real estate? Because it's not just the vacancy; it's that basically that means the tenants have a bigger amount of the stick than they had when there was, like crise du logement, right? Like in that position, it's the owner who has the upper hand in a whole bunch of ways. Whereas like now you're kind of desperate. You don't want your tenants to leave. You're renting to people that you might not normally rent to because you're hungry. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, very good question. I'm not into managing a lot of properties, but I hear people speaking, and definitely it takes more time to rent in certain mostly like popular areas such as probably Outremont, Ville-Marie, where there used to be a high concentration of students and Airbnb, and now there is less of that. So definitely more empty units, and they're high in the price. So people are certain times preferring to go, exterior of Montreal, or maybe in the suburbs. The price have exploded in the housing industry. In the suburbs too, there's so much growing on. So with the fact that you don't need to be at the office every day, maybe that's also another, reason why. But long term, I think the price is going to go back. The people are going to go back in town because they want to enjoy a restaurant. They want to enjoy life. Some offices will open up. So to me, it's temporary in my book.
If I may, I would kind of have a follow-up question on that. Is since about a year, well, since really 18 months, we've heard a lot about in semi-commercial properties, the conversion of commercial to residential. And so obviously last year it was extremely relevant. And my question to you is, now that things are reopening up a little bit, one, do you think it's still as relevant? And if landlords or owners want to keep a commercial unit, what would you advise them to try to find as tenants? More of a professional or retail, or what would you do?
It's a good question, Axel. I don't do a lot of commercial stuff, but I can say one thing that comes to my mind is that if you're able to convert the commercial into residential, just do it because of many reasons. The first one being that we're still in COVID. We don't know how long it's going to last and how fast the commercial is going to pick up. But if it does pick up, well, good for you. But I mean, in residential, the loan amount that you can get when you're building is residential is highly more than commercial, right? Some banks right now, they're frightened to lend commercial. But this being said, you definitely, in my book, are able to increase value of your real estate if you turn out residential, because the amount of financing you're able to get on a property is directly related to its value. So the more money you can get on a property, the higher the value is. So in commercial, if you're only getting 65%, or some case 50%, it's not the same value as in multi-residential. You're able to get 85% of its value, of its
Yeah, and
economical
that's
value.
not even to mention the cost structure, because I actually just liquidated my last semi-commercial asset this summer, and that was exactly it. Like when, one aspect is the financing, but the other aspect is your cost structure, because if you're in semi-commercial, your taxes are going to be higher. You have to pay more hydro, like whatever. If you have to do any work, you have to get guys who have commercial cards. So it's like the whole cost structure of that project is completely different from residential.
Absolutely, Terry.
Mm.
So do it if you can.
Okay, well, I think that was pretty much the questions I wanted to ask today. Axel, did you have anything else?
No, that was about it. But where can people find out more about you? Oh,
1 second. If we're done with our questions, I could always like to give the audience an opportunity. So people who are watching this broadcast live, if anybody has a question for Nick, now would be a good time to drop it in the comments section. It should pop up on my screen.
Great.
yeah, no, that was quite instructive. And in the meantime, before the questions come, like Nick, you mentioned it a few times, and the thread in the negotiation is just kind of be nice, be genuine, be transparent, and just kind of do what you said you were going to do. And usually
Smile.
it helps. And smile.
Okay, well, it looks like we don't have any audience questions today. So maybe we can just end up with Nick, why don't you tell people how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think the best way is to use a messenger app. Just hook me up on Facebook. I think it's the best, or Instagram. And I'm available if you have any questions about anything that could work for you.
Great. So definitely, I'm not the only one who wants your top 3 recommendations.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we'll have to make that list.
Okay. Well, look, Nick, thanks so much for being with us today. And guys, audience members, don't hesitate to get in touch with him if you want to continue the conversation.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. Be well.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.